Welcome to the Third Apron Salarycast. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, and this is another mock-off season where I'm going to do some hypothetical moves, mainly for fun, but also to show how teams can accomplish goals within the salary cap rules. And this one's on the Orlando Magic. I'm really excited about this one. I had a lot of fun trying to put this one together. I've already covered them extensively on the podcast. I had Jason Beatty on, and we discussed what they can do, who they can pursue for another scorer, and I already went over their salary cap situation on the Third Apron newsletter. I put links in the description. I highly suggest you check them out for a little more context on their situation. So the Magic had this injury-riddled season where Paolo Banchero, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner only played about 6 games altogether. So they won 6 games fewer than the previous season. So you can mostly chalk up the decline up to that. But at the same time, it's still pretty obvious that they do need some more offensive help. They need another scorer. They could use another shot creator. And the GM even acknowledged that in the closing press conference for the season. So in this mock off season, I'm going to address it in a way that I think would be something that they might really try to pursue if possible. So I'm going to have them acquire a scorer. I'm going to have them acquire 2. But first, before we even get into that, I want to go over their payroll because they are already going through a bit of a tax crunch this year and also for next year. But as far as this year, they're already above the tax, way above the tax, and they're at 17 players. So they're going to have to cut some players anyways. They're going to have to consolidate the roster a little bit. But if they went into the season the way it is, they're about 18 over the tax, and that's about a $41 million tax penalty. So they are not going to pay the tax this year. I don't think they're going to want to pay tax just yet. So the easiest way that they're going to go about trying to get below the tax most likely involves declining some of these team options that they've got here. So if they were to decline the team options of Mo Wagner's $11 million salary, Gary Harris's $7.5 million, and Corey Joseph $3.5 million, that would get them down to $3 million below the luxury tax line and down to 14 players. So at a minimum, this is what they can do if they don't do anything else. But they still have a bunch of other mid-level salary level players like Jonathan Isaac, Cole Anthony, Wendell Carter, Gogo Bitadze that they can use to pursue these trades. So just in case you've been thinking, why don't they do a package involving Mo Wagner, Gary Harris? I get the feeling that those guys will probably become free agents instead of being packaged in a trade, because then that will just make the Magic's roster way more expensive than it already is going to be. And now, before we get into any trades, I want to look at the Magic's future expenses to show why that might play into the type of player that they might target in a trade. So the biggest thing going on is Paolo Banchero's extension eligibility. He's going to be eligible to sign a rookie scale extension this summer, and he'll likely secure a max contract. It's projected at 5 years, $246 million. It's worth 25% of the salary cap. And this is basically the same thing that Franz Wagner got with the Magic, just a little higher with the salary cap rising. Now, very good chance, not a very good chance, he's going to get Rose Rule language negotiated into his contract. What that is, it allows him to get escalators that would allow his contract to reach up to 30% of the salary cap on average if he just gets an All-NBA team. Now, technically, they could structure it where there's escalators. It could be something like, okay, if you're third team, you get 27%. If you're second team, you get 28%. And then if you're first team, you get 30%. They could do something like that. They could get creative with it. However, they gave Franz Wagner in his max contract the simple, if you get third team All-NBA, you could get the 30% max. I would have to imagine that the same thing's going to happen to Paolo in his contract. And Paolo might actually have a pretty decent case to get All-NBA next year, especially if, when he's healthy, he plays enough games, and the Magic improve, which isn't asking for too much because they won 47 games the year before, so they'll be right back on track, going from 41 to 47. Voters might look at that as some very impressive improvement. But also, the East is pretty wide open right now, especially if they were to get home court advantage in the first round, which I think is very possible for the Magic. That can very well secure him an All-NBA spot, in which case his salary would jump up to 30% of the salary cap, starting at $51 million. It'd be $296 million over 5 years. And I'm not saying I'm predicting that Paolo's going to qualify for this, but when doing these projections, it's best to project as high as possible in case he does meet the criteria. Now, here's a projection for their 2026-27 season, but I'm including Paolo Banchero getting that 30% max salary. So you've got two max players, Banchero and Wagner. You've got Suggs making a lot of money too. And you got all these guys making like a mid-level exception type money, several draft picks. You can see I've got them with a very high draft pick via the Suns. I'll explain why that is a little later. But if Paolo makes the 30% max, they could be looking at a roster that at a minimum will exceed about $100 million in luxury tax penalties and put them pretty well over the second apron. I don't expect them to pay anything close to this, and I'm not entirely sure they're going to be ready to pay any tax next year unless they at the very least win a playoff series in 2026. So this could mean a couple things. The first main one is that the Magic are slowly approaching a time where they're going to need to consolidate the roster. Now, that doesn't mean that package all their mid-level guys and try to get a more expensive one, because that's going to make the roster way more expensive. What I mean is more so they're going to need to decide who their top 5-6 guys are. And it's not even necessarily guys that are already on the team, but everybody else can be players that they haven't even acquired yet. And so when I mean consolidate, they're simply going to have to trim down on their depth, eliminate these salary slots. Instead of having like a team that's like 9, 10, 11 deep, they're going to want like at most maybe 6, 7 guys who are making this much money, with like the 6th or 7th guy being at most making mid-level type money. That's how they can keep like a luxury tax penalty that's not too high, but at the very least try to stay below the second apron. So because of this, I'd be pretty surprised if they go after another max level player like a De'Aaron Fox or LaMelo Ball to have a third max player on top of having these 3 other guys. That's going to be a lot of money, and I'm not sure it's going to make them significantly better to that it's like worth paying a tax penalty north of 100 million or so. So because of this, I could see, and this is like more like a year from now problem, a situation where they start to look to trade some of these guys over here, mainly for savings, and then maybe just get some draft picks back. But then this leads to the other thing, that whatever trade they end up doing, I think it's going to be a little simple. I don't think they're going to do anything too crazy with the salary matching. I would guess that whoever they target, they're going to mainly just take back as much money as they're sending out so they don't go into the tax this year and keep their cost control next season. The main thing is they got to identify someone that they highly value, that they can bring in to be one of their top 5-6 guys over the coming seasons. And now one last thing before we get into any trades, I want to take a look at the Magic's draft pick situation through 2032, just because I would imagine this is what they're going to go to in terms of getting value in their trade so they can keep their top players. So pretty clean situation. They have all their own draft picks over the next 8 drafts. However, they have a very interesting situation going on next year. So yeah, they have 2 first-round picks this year, 16-25, but then next year, they have the right to swap their first-round pick, their 2026 pick, with either the Suns or the Wizards. First, the Wizards are going to have the opportunity to swap with the Suns, which might not happen because the Wizards, I would guess, based on what happened last year, they'll still be worse than the Suns. But then the Magic have the right to swap, whichever pick is the worst. How did the Magic get this pick? They traded 3 second-round picks to the Suns 3 years ago, and in exchange, they got this swap. Looking really nice for the Magic right now. If last season's standings played out similarly to this year, then you've got the Suns maybe like in the middle of the lottery, and then the Magic, assuming that they do improve, instead of being like 16th, maybe they're in like the early 20s. You're looking at maybe moving up 10 spots in the draft, going from middle to late first round pick to a lottery pick. And this makes next year's first round pick extremely valuable right now. So if you're the Magic, there's a couple ways you can go about this. If you want, you can play things out, see, maybe even jumps up into the top 4, and now you have the opportunity to draft another cornerstone. At the same time, if you want to trade for an impactful player right now and you're not going to include many of your top guys or any of them, then this selection is going to be highly coveted from other teams. You can trade some other first-round picks. You can trade technically up to 6 as a maximum. I don't know how much they can get done with these selections right now, like middle of the first round and a late pick. And I don't know how far out the Magic want to trade any picks in the future. They've never really traded any picks that far out. They've been one of the more conservative teams in terms of keeping draft picks. They really don't trade any future picks at all. I think the last time they traded like a first round pick in general was in that Domantas Sabonis, Victor Oladipo, Serge Ibaka trade in 2016. So teams will probably highly covet that selection in 2026. And the other thing is, if you're the Magic, you already saw how high that payroll is looking for next year. Do you really want to bring in another player who might not necessarily be in the rotation, but is going to make a good amount of money? Maybe there's a solid argument to cashing in on that pick now and bringing in that high level scorer that you are looking for. So I ended up doing 2 trades, and this is the first and most important one. I acquired Trey Murphy. If you listen to the podcast, Jason and I, we discussed just about every player that we could see the Magic going for. Our favorites included Kobe White and Derek White. But also last week, Kevin O'Connor had a mock draft and some intel that the Pelicans might be open to moving just about anybody on the roster. And a lot of people looked at that and said, hey, my favorite team, if they can get Trey Murphy, that would be amazing. And I just thought, I feel like that's exactly who the Magic would want to target as their scorer. 6'8", so fits the archetype of player that they want on the roster, just a lot of size. So for a 6'8" guy to play the 2, I feel like that's exactly in the Magic's wheelhouse, and hopefully doesn't take away too much from their defense. But also his contract is amazing. He's got a 4-year deal worth $112 million, so an average of $27 million a year. Starts at $25 million for this year and tops out at $31 million. So not only are they getting a player that I think would fit, what they're going for, but they're also getting the exact type of contract that would fit their payroll structure to help as they navigate the costs of a very expensive roster in the coming years. So I structured it as a 3-teamer involving the Cavs. If you saw my Cavs mock off season from last week, I came up with a deal that involves them trading Jared Allen for a cheaper backup in Goga Bitadze and a pick, and that would save the Cavs a lot of money and get them closer to getting below the second apron. So in this, the Pelicans, they get in Allen. They also bring in Anthony Black, who can be their top guard while DeJounte Murray's out. And they also get that 2026 first that has that Sun swap that I mentioned earlier. I also included Gary Harris just because the salary matching. So it's a sign and trade. He gets a 3-year minimum deal, but only the first year is guaranteed. We see teams last year do these types of sign and trades to cheat, get the outgoing salary at the minimum required. As a below apron team, the Magic can use this expanded trade exception. They just need to get within $8.5 million of Trey Murphy's $25 million. So with Goga and Anthony Black, it's just short of that $16.47 million required. So that's where Gary Harris comes in with his minimum salary. And since they used this expanded trade exception, the Magic are now hard capped to the first apron. So then I made one more trade, and this mainly saves the Magic a lot of money both this year and next year. And it involves the Kings. They are trading DeMar DeRozan for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Feels like they're going to trade DeMar. So they're getting KCP back, which is a slightly worse contract, but better fit. Doesn't require having them move any picks to trade DeMar. The Nets get him in, and in exchange, they're moving up from the 36th pick in the second round to the 16th overall pick in the first round. So now they have 5 first-round picks, but now they have a much better chance of combining some of these picks to move up in the draft in subsequent deals. And they also get to take a flyer on Jett Howard. They're using their cap space to do this. So the Magic dropped 20 spots in this draft for doing this, but they are getting off the contract of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Jett Howard. That saves them $27 million, more so like $30 million when you include the salaries of the draft picks involved. The Magic don't need to take back any money in this deal technically, so instead they create massive trade exceptions for Pope and Howard. However, we aren't going to use those exceptions because instead they're going to use the savings to sign another player who can boost their offense. And here's the final roster that I put together. As you can see, I've got Trey Murphy in, and I signed Ty Jerome with the full mid-level exception. It runs for 4 years, $60.6 million, and it starts at $14.1 million. I've mentioned in the Cavs podcast, mock offseason, and post about them in Third Apron that I don't think the Cavs are going to bring him back because they're already having such an expensive roster, and bringing him back just complicates that. So I have Jerome in, and I also have them re-signing Mo Wagner at above the minimum. Gave him half of what his $11 million team option would be. I've got them using the biannual exception on Precious Achiuwa. I'm not in love with that move, but I just figured they need a third big, and that's maybe someone they can get with that. Now with Goga gone, they're still going to need another big. And once they get the 14 players, I also have them including Corey Joseph at the veteran minimum and that 36 overall pick. That gets them just under the tax. The Magic essentially trade their entire draft in 2025 and 2026 to get this done, but they have all their first round picks in 2027 onward. Overall, much stronger offensively. They might take a little bit of a step back defensively by going from KCP and Black to Murphy and Jerome, but I don't think it should be that big of a step back, and they get their offense at a much higher level. And here's their roster for 2026 and 2027. I had Wagner's contract stay flat at $5.5 million. Achiuwa's decline to $4.9 million. The Magic love to do these type of structures. And as you can see, much cheaper payroll, much cheaper roster, lower tax penalty than the other projection I have by roughly like 40 to 50 million once they get the 14 players. So at this point, once we get to 2026, they're really going to need to start consolidating, like I mentioned earlier, especially if Paolo does get that 30% salary. And although they're still over the tax, this construction still has them going over the second apron. And maybe they want to pay some tax, especially if they do well enough to justify it, but I would imagine they still want to just stay below the second apron. So then here is where they have that optionality with all those team options. Let's say they decline Cole Anthony's $13.1 million salary and they waive and stretch Jonathan Isaac's remaining guaranteed money. He's got, at that point, he'll have $8 million guaranteed over 3 years. So you can just stretch that over 7. So he has this little $1.1 million dead cap hit. And now they're below the tax, which they get over that threshold once they fill up the roster. But more importantly, they're about $31 million below the second apron. So if the goal is to just stay below that threshold, they will be able to fill up their last 5 roster spots while doing that. And they'll have some flexibility to bring in some actual players. And that is my Magic mock-off season. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comment. I don't think Trey Murphy is going to become available, but if he was, is this enough value for him, or maybe are the Magic giving up a little too much to make that happen? Let me know what you think. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and Blue Sky at my name, Yossi Gazan. I'm going to be reacting to all sorts of transactions as we get closer to free agency with salary cap analysis. Make sure you subscribe to Third Apron on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and the newsletter on Substack. And check the link in the description about Sports Business Classroom. We still have spots available for that program.